Welcome back to another episode of Pushing Back Cars with me, Melon. Yeah, I know. Look, you missed me last week. It was a desperate attempt by the other two stooges to cover up for massive deficiencies, but your favorite one's back again. You can all relax. You can just let that rest and sit in. How are you there, Raph? You're wearing a beanie, which says to me you're probably not in Hawaii.
No, I'm currently not, but I am going to Hawaii. I'm going there in a day, actually, going to Lahui. No, I'm up in Juneau, Alaska. It's pretty frosty. Beautiful. We were just talking offline about the approach, getting here and then getting into a place called Ketchikan. It's fun, man. Like it really is. And like I was saying, it's crazy when you do stuff like this. You're like, and I'm getting paid for it. It's just as a pilot, it's a good gig. I'm not mad at it.
You know that little that postcard of like, what do you want to be when you grow up, son? I want to be a pilot. And the mother's like, you can't do both. You can't grow up and be a pilot. We're all little boys on the inside. Yeah, nice. Hey, Mike, how are you going, pal? What's been going on in your neck of the woods?
I've been doing my job and getting paid for it, just like Raph. Well, I'm no pilot. I'm not that good looking. I'm not as I'm not up there on the charts with what you guys think you are. But I love my job, and I'm still pretty amazed that, like, man, I take a step back and like I get paid for this. So yeah, I had a really good week, man. Just kicking off a lot of training for the next really few months. Like it's go time. So, but it all kicked off really well, and had a good week, and now I'm back here for a short period, and then I got to leave again tomorrow, actually. So I'm literally going to be bouncing back and forth for the next few months. So not much personal time ahead, but it's not going to last forever. And I'm going to just try to enjoy all of it, man, because, like we've talked about, this job isn't going to last forever. These experiences aren't going to last forever. So I'm really just trying to take it one bit at a time, one step at a time, and really absorb everything that happens. And just, I just really want to enjoy it. And this past week, I really did.
It's awesome, man. I mean, Raph and I talk about flying, which we love, but I know when we talk to you, and you fill me in with my gorilla brain. I can't really understand all the detail of what you do, but it's super cool as well. And I know that's a very meaningful job, a very fulfilling role. And, I can't help but always think about my own children and the safety that they live in from the hard work of men and women like you, mate. And so I really appreciate what you do. I know we banter a lot, but suffice to say, I know what you do is dangerous and a lot of respect.
Well, no, I'm shit out of luck because now I don't know what to say. I can't say anything bad about you at the beginning of the episodes.
Yeah. You're like, Melon, it's confirmed he really does hate me. He said something good. Yeah. So you guys got together last week. I wasn't able to make the hookup where I was up at the new base. Just the timings didn't work. But from all accounts, that was a pretty solid episode. And you guys were sort of talking about perhaps this week we're going to return to a previous series that we ran, where we did a 3-part series on a pretty amazing book called Tender Warrior. And Mike, maybe you'd like to sort of fill in with what you were thinking the topic would be this week.
Yeah, of course. So Tender Warrior was a book that was, just for me, it was passed to me by Raph. And from Raph, it was given to him from our other friend, Jimmy Boggs. And I'm sure so-and-so it's just been passed around. That was about 3 years ago. Since then, I have personally bought this book for at least probably 6-7 other men that I know or who have reached out to me just because they were all asking the same questions that I had. And this book just really, really helps men in general. There's things in here about women as well, but really helps men identify who you really are inside. I know we did a episode on like, who are you really, like your spiritual side, and like, that this talks about a man's purpose in life, his roles, responsibilities, what we were built and intended for, And there is some biblical stories and different things wrapped into it to help you understand. But Stu Weber is the author. And just a little quick background on him. He was a Green Beret in Vietnam. I believe he did 2 tours in Vietnam and seen a lot of really terrible things. He stayed in for a long time. I want to say he got out as a senior officer, became a pastor up in Oregon for a while, and then recently retired. And I think we actually reached out to him to see if we could have him on the show, and respectfully, he declined. He's like, "Hey, I'm retired now, and I'm just, I'm with my family after years of service," and I absolutely respect that. But anyway, this book, Every Man's Purpose, Every Woman's Dream, Every Child's Hope. These chapters really help you dig into yourself, most of all, answer a lot of those really hard, tough questions that people always ask. Why is this happening to me? Who am I? Who am I supposed to be in these moments? Why is life so hard? Just go down the list. And it's like, for me personally, besides the Bible, which is intimidating to a lot of people. People don't know how to read it or what to read or anything. And they just kind of feel like, well, I don't want anything part of it because I'm a worthless POS and I've messed up so many things. You just get that anxiety if you don't fully know how to approach it. This book is not like that. This spoke to me, him being a soldier. I know it spoke to Raph, and all of us served. So some of the stuff he talks about really gets our attention because we can relate through military service. But overall, this is just stuff about life, about men, why we were created, and ultimately our purpose and what we're doing here on Earth. We can just float and try to figure it out, or you can have some solid pillars here. In this chapter, we did the first 3 a while ago with Tony Sr. was our guest, talking about the 4 pillars of manhood and different things like that are just invaluable. I still use it to this day. But this one's a little different. And
you want to just quickly just say those 4 pillars, just in case people didn't pick up that one? Just a quick cover off.
Sure. Yeah. So the 4 pillars of manhood, as defined in here, number 1 in the book, it says king, but it means leader. So you're supposed to be a leader in your life. You lead your life. If you have a family, you be the leader in your family, or be the leader in a relationship. Like, that's what a man should be. The next one is mentor. So you've been around for a bit. You learn some things, what to do, what not to do. You should be mentoring those around you in your circle if you ultimately want to get better, because you may not have the answers for everything. But if you're investing in other people and building them up, they're going to become part of your circle, and ultimately the community is going to grow. So if you do learn success, if you learn failures, make sure you're passing them on to the people that mean most to you, or at work, or your family, kids, whatever. The next one is being a warrior. Okay. And I know when people hear warrior, it's like, well, I'm not in the military. It does not mean that. A warrior is being brave and courageous to do the things that scare the shit out of you, that you have to get done, even when the world's against you, but hey, this is the right thing to do in order for this to happen, right? Maybe, hey, maybe I have to work extra hours so my kids can get a good education, and there's no way around it. I just have to do this. It's going to suck. I'm not going to get a lot of sleep. I'm going to be miserable because I hate my boss. But hey, I have to do this in order for my kids to have a successful future. That's being a warrior, right? Everyday style warrior. And then the last one is being a friend, and what that really means. Being there for good times and bad times, offering advice, humility, counsel, celebrate the good times, be there and hold each other in the hard times. It really makes you think about, when you call someone your friend, are they really a friend, or are they an acquaintance? And you sit back and you look and really see what people do in your life when times are good and times are bad, you can really define who my real friends are, and then who's just along for the ride, and that's been a wide-eyed open experience for myself over the last couple of years. Like, wow. So anyway, that's just a really quick recap. Those are 4 pillars that I never really identified with when I was growing up in my 20s. I joined the military at 19 years old after I lost my father at 18. Didn't have a father figure. I had no idea who I was supposed to be. And I know Mellon struggled probably too when he was with him and his brothers and sisters and stuff after his father passed away at, I believe, 11. And you kind of grow up and you're like, who the hell am I supposed to be? Like, what am I supposed to do in this situation? And when you can't make a phone call and go, hey, Dad, what do I do? You just, well, I guess I'm the man now, and I just suck it up and figure it out. Right. And God, did I fail at that? I failed at it so many times, but I didn't have the structure. I didn't have words like these, and pretty much kind of like I call it the playbook, right? It's kind of a really good playbook that I could reference and know who to be in what moments. And it's really just changed my life. I know it's changed for me. More, the 3 of us talk about it, changed our life, how we communicate, everything. Go ahead, Mel.
The thing there with these 4 pillars that has been very powerful is being able to recognize in every situation which one of those 4 the situation is calling for, which part of your personality, which part of you is going to be best here, and it's going to change. And so there are times when you're going to be the leader or the mentor, and then there'll be times when you just need to be the friend. Sometimes the warrior, that's as Mike was saying, that might just be getting on doing the thing that needs to be done. That could be you mowing the lawn or doing the shopping or whatever it is. So it's a really good framework to be able to think in when things are tough. Who am I being called to be right now out of those 4? That has been very effective for me.
Yeah. So with that little quick wrap up of the last 3, this next one that we decided to do, after you identify who you're supposed to be and all these different things, and then you're in it. This chapter is chapter 4, and the title of it is called Staying Power. And if you think about that, it should hit you. Staying power. I read this morning when I got up and was having some coffee. And I've read this whole book before, but I reread it, and I was like, man. And I was telling Raph and Mellon, right before we hit the button, I read it and I was kind of like, man, I kind of feel like shit in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Because how many times in my life where it's just like I didn't stay. I didn't have good staying power. But the more we just discussed it, just in the last, 30 minutes before we hit record, having these discussions with Mel and Raph, they're just like, dude, like same with us. Like, I didn't meet the mark, or, I didn't have staying power because of this or that, or I was distracted, or my focus wasn't here. He's like, we've all done that. And he's like, and the first thing I thought about was like, man, I need to give myself a break, like give myself some grace here. Like, I can't, we talked about it in an episode before, or the one before that, it was like, don't let that define the rest of your life. So just in this last 30 minutes, I'm sitting here trying to process this shit feeling. And it's like, oh man, kind of feel down. But then at the same time, it's like, well, at least I'm talking about it. And these guys are opening up, sharing the same stuff. Like, dude, you're not the only guy. So anyways, yeah, staying power. Let's kind of jump into this chapter. And there's a lot of great points that Stu has, and definitely take some notes if you can. It's definitely noteworthy stuff.
So I was having a read here, and I was really struck in the opening what he is defining staying power as, and the way that I've read it is that a commitment has been made in a given situation, and Stu Weber here is talking about the ability of the person to deliver on that commitment. And it could be a very long-term commitment, like in a marriage, where the phrase "to death do us part" has been said. It could be a work commitment. It could be a daily, I'm going to take care of these things by the end of the day type of commitment. they're not all going to be formal. Some won't be written, some will be verbal, some will be implied. And I was really reading it in the context here. He has some stats in the opening there of talking about the number of people in prison who grew up without a father, talking about that being in the region of 70%. And so the really sort of confronting one was the men who don't stick around for their family, not able to deliver on what I think is the ultimate commitment there in the family of being there as a father. And so, you know, these children that grow up without a father, it's not like, you know, you've been thrown to the wolves, or you're definitely going down the worst path, but you're stacking the odds. And this is a really fundamental part of the chaos that we're referring to in our title, Pushing Back Chaos. So I was really just in that, you know, that children of divorce and broken families, it is a lifelong impact. And there's a lot of data to read up on that. It's not Melon's opinion. That's stuff that you can look up, differences, outcomes for children in divorce. And typically it's when there's a lot of bad feeling and, you know, like a bad divorce. And when people remain committed to the kids and co-parenting, I don't think that's what we're referring to here. But these ultimate commitments that people are giving their word to and not been able to deliver on really contribute in a very profound and direct way to disrupting and breaking down individuals and families and communities and society. So that's sort of where Stu Weber starts, which is a pretty heavy opening. Raf.
Yeah. So you kind of nailed something that I was just thinking about when I was rereading this chapter. Actually, to be completely honest, I listened to the audio book, which was kind of cool. Right after I was done with my trip flying out here, plugged in the headphones and listened to a couple chapters actually. And one thing that really struck me was, and you kind of talked about the lifelong impact that a missing father in a home has on the generations to come, and not just the kids, but the kids of the kids. You know, if that child ends up having children, you know, grandchildren and children, that sort of thing. And you're right. This isn't our opinion. There's so many statistics right now. I know that a really popular word that people like to throw out there is equity. And, you know, when people refer to equity, we're mostly referring to resources like money and sort of like a privileged position, that sort of thing. But the reality is, I don't think there's any more astounding element of equity than having a father in the home. Like, honest to God, like if you want equity for your children, keep that marriage together. That alone will have more of an impact than resources and money and the right neighborhood and the right zip code and all the other bullshit. Having that father in the homes, and listen, I'm a living testament of that. I grew up in a crime-ridden neighborhood. It's a street called the Lyric Streets. It's been renamed, but I've counted this story many a time, so I'll keep it to 30 seconds. There was literally a police responding on that street every night. There was always ambulances. There was always fire trucks. There was drug dealers everywhere. There was hookers on the street. I mean, it was literally like the belly of the beast. It was the devil's den. And, you know, not everybody had their parents together. I had plenty of friends growing up who were single parents, you know, single mothers. Shout out to single mothers who are literally trying to do everything they can. But I've noticed, looking back after 45 years, that the thing that gave me the best chance of not just surviving, but thriving was having my father in the home. I mean, that's just, we were dirt poor. I mean, you know, but it was a fact that I had a father who was involved to whatever degree that he could, that saved me from falling into, you know, using drugs or joining a gang. And dude, I talked about this. I was friends with most of the people that, you know, most of the little kids that I grew up with all went into gangs. I mean, they would ask me on a weekly basis, not a daily basis, like, hey, you know, join our gang. And it just, to me at the time, it just seemed like hanging out with friends. But the fact that my dad made it very clear that I wasn't going to go down that road and a healthy fear that I had towards my father because he was a disciplinarian. I mean, that's literally what saved my ass from going into the wrong side. But it was like razor thin. I mean, the margin of error was fucking like damn near non-existent. So I think that's something that I think this book really articulates, is that the effects and the after effects for generations to come are significant. And you talk about the men in prison, and it's just as bad for women. A woman that grows up without a father, real father present in her life, this is like the headspring of her life. Like, this is the one man that of all things should be keeping his word and should really kind of show her the standard of what a man should be, right? And if that's missing, unfortunately, most women will go and kind of find what a man is in the wrong place, and they end up in abusive relationships, or they get used, or they're with men who just aren't men. They're flaky. They don't keep their word. They might be married to or they might be with, might have children with like 3 other women, and it's a mess. But in her the way her mind has been shaped and focused, it's like, well, I guess that's normal, right, for a man not to keep his word. And I like that Stu makes no qualms about it, that a man who doesn't keep his word is simply not a man. Like, if you don't keep your word, you are not a man. End of story. You can fucking make all the excuses in the world, but at the end of the day, you keep your word to your friends, to your family, to your neighborhood, to your dreams. Like, if whatever it is that you want to do in life, if you start making excuses, you basically are giving in your fucking man card. And I mean, when you read that, you're like, wow, like he does not mince words.
And he's highlighting this. He opens with this, which is, it's talking here effectively about being a word, about having integrity, that you think about things and you reserve, and then you commit, knowing with intention that there's going to be hardship, and then you deliver. And that cycle of integrity is what this chapter of the book is about, this staying power. And he opens with the most egregious breakdown in that, which is a father not being there for his children. So it's a very confronting way to open, and the impacts from that are tremendous. And men have got to look at themselves here. He doesn't need to open with mums who take off, because that's not what the statistics are. Mothers tend to stay. It's, if one person's shot through, we all know that it's going to be the father. When I was in the neonatal unit when Annie was born, my daughter, there was, it's a hard time. It's a trying time. A lot of babies that are born prematurely, there's health issues and complications, and tend to be, lower socioeconomic families that suffer more. And there was quite a large number of guys who were not there, the fathers. It was just too much, and they didn't come. And unfortunately, that was a significant number, and those babies would then get special handling from, anyway. But it was like one baby the whole time we were there where the mother took off. So it does happen. We're not saying it doesn't happen, but typically mothers stick to their commitments and their word, and they deliver in this area. And it's men who are deficient in this area. In this, the thing that I prize the highest, and I know Raf does too, and certainly I know is a massive priority for Mike, in the commitment you've made when you've chosen and you've had kids. And to not deliver in this area is the biggest breakdown that Stu can see, Stu Weber. So he opens the chapter talking about this. But it goes across all other areas. The old saying, a man's word is his bond, is a quote in there right in the middle of the chapter. And you're like, that seems like such an old-fashioned term now, like an old cowboy movie or a King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table type story. But that still holds true. Like, no one wants to work with a person or have a friendship with a person where they're flippant and they're not delivering on their word. And it's like, the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Like, someone who breaks their word to you repeatedly should not be inside your circle of relationships. Like, they should be omitted from a place at the table, be it professionally, family, intimate relationships, etc. So the key part in this is your word as your bond, I think, is where the whole crux of the chapter rests.
If I could just add to that, I think a big I think what we have against our current culture right now is that for decades now, our society's kind of designed itself around comfort. And so you've got entire generations that seek comfort. They seek it in food, they seek it in activities, they seek, you know what I mean? Like you just see it all around. And we're all victims of it. It's easy to fall into that, instant gratification, that whole thing. It's all kind of wrapped into that kind of that nebulous. But I think that's the reason, like it's easy to sit there and say, staying power, always commit, always do the thing. But the challenge is accepting that uncomfortableness. I'll give a personal example. My wife and I, the last couple of days, we've just been having a hell of a time. And I couldn't figure out why. Like I literally could not figure out why. We didn't say anything terrible to each other, but I just feel this tension. And it was the day that I was leaving for this trip, and we had to meet with our CPA, our accountant. So we did that, and after we were done, we stepped out, and I could have just as easily just kind of just said, well, I'll just leave and things will cool off when I get back. We'll be lovey-dovey again or whatever. But I thought, you know what, I can't let that. I didn't want to start a fight, but I also was like, I need to do something. Like I can't just let this fester, right? Like, because being a man is part of being a leader. And so as gently as I could, I was like, hey, I could feel there's some tension between us. And I was like, and I've been, for the life of me, I can't figure out what I've said to you, or maybe I was like, because you haven't said anything to offend me, but I feel this tension. She's like, yeah, so did I. And, that conversation quickly turned into like, I don't know what that was about. And, of course we embraced and we hugged and talked about our marriage and talked about like things that, how, like basically where we had fallen in the last couple of weeks. Just, we were so busy and we had made and it dawned on me, and I was like, fuck, she's so right. She had actually made an effort to kind of do a little date night, and I would make an excuse like, oh, I can't because of ABC or whatever it was. And she made that attempt twice, and both times I kind of struck it down, and it made her feel like, well, if he's not going to try, then, I won't make an effort. Right. And so the times that I was like, why is she making an effort to like, have intimacy or like, be whatever, like, yeah, I tell that we were just like at different ends of the house. It dawned on me that she had made that effort. I just dismissed them because I prioritized whatever else was, what I thought was important, which is, usually job related. So I'm saying that as like as a cautionary tale. I'm not saying that because, I think it's literally, looking back, I was like, I'm such an idiot. I helped create the environment. Luckily, I was smart enough to be like, all right, fucking enough is enough. Like this, I'm not going to leave with this void or this weirdness. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. The point I'm trying to make though is that you have to force yourself to be uncomfortable. Like it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation. It's going to be fucking weird to talk about some of these things, even though you do it once a month and you feel like you're beating a dead horse. But I'm telling you, it's not just necessary. Like it's crazy important, and I'm not trying to get all religious and stuff, but I genuinely do think that there is some play by the devil in this. I think the devil does get off watching our society destroy itself, marriages. And listen, we're better to start than the fucking nucleus of the family, which is the marriage, right? Or between a man and a woman. And we can go down that rabbit hole. But the point is, I really genuinely do think there is some evil at play. I really, really do. Like I used to not think that, but now I'm like, no, I think there is. I think society's being attacked.
I didn't have exactly the same, but the same. Like just there was tension, and I was like, I could feel it in my nervous system. So it was just like something was a bit off, and it was the same thing. It was like, oh, I think I need to have like a conversation. And thank God, like we've done this enough. We both were just able to just sit with it and not have the reaction occur. Like to be, knowing that the other person was going to sit there until the end of the conversation, and neither of us were going to react from, you got that slightly wounded, hurt sort of feeling happening. Something's a bit off. And previously, I would have kicked off, or would have been more like, there's some problem over there because I'm feeling like this. Whereas this time it was like, something has gone out of balance here, and let's just really talk about it in a really calm way. And like, 45 minutes later, you know, you could just feel just the comfort and the kindness and the love and the warmth. And I was like, man, how good to have a breakthrough without having to have a breakdown first, to be like, what was happening there, to talk about it. Oh yeah, I thought this thing, and you know, and then I was thinking that, and you're doing this and no one's saying anything. And to be able to step in early and get that sort of convergence again, right? So really similar to what you guys have had. And good for you for doing it before you flew out.
Yeah, yeah. But again, I had to like talk myself through it. Like it really had to do because I knew there was a potential of like it blowing up on me, and then I'm leaving really upset, right? Like so.
Yeah.
But I want to underscore, man, like just it is important for everybody, not just men, to be uncomfortable. Because I think, and I say this all the time to my wife when I'm come home and I see like, and I'm not fat shaming, but I see some morbidly obese people that could barely take a couple steps in the airport. I mean, just it's painful to watch. And I just think to myself, comfort is fucking killing us. It is literally killing us. And it's a real, it's an emergency, man. It is to me, because I watch people of all walks of life all across the country, and they're just, I mean, people could barely walk. I mean, that's the most basic function of human anatomy, you know, and people are struggling to walk. And it scares me.
Nick Grossi talks about his former guest, you know, that whole pleasure-seeking behavior and eliminating it from your life, like whatever it is that you seek as pleasure, that is probably going to have inside it a core that's going to be a vice. And so then the opposite of that is being able to step in and embrace the discomfort, which Raf is talking about.
So I really like that Raf said, I truly believe that the devil is at work and he enjoys watching. And it's 100%. The story that popped in my head is a couple of years ago when I was going through asking all these questions. Jimmy Boggs, our buddy that passed this book Tender Warrior to Raf, and then Raf passed it to me, sat there and listened to me for hours, and we actually had one of the most heated arguments of our relationship. And I've known Jimmy as long as I've known Raf, where I was literally swearing at him at the top of my lungs over the phone, pissed off because I knew better. And I was so sure that no, that's not how it goes, man. And this is how it's supposed to be. And he was crying. We were both angry and crying, but the dude loves me in a way that I never knew before. And he knew I was hurting so bad. And he asked me the first time, it was the first time I ever read this story, but it was the story of Job in the Bible. And he just said, hey, he's like, Mike, do you know the story of Job? And I was like, no, I don't. And I don't really care. Like, oh, honestly, just because I was so angry and I didn't, I was just angry, put it blatantly. So I said no. And of course, that night I didn't read it, and I was just whatever, and it took a couple of days until I was, all right, well, if he cares about me that much, he wanted to tell me this, like there has to be a reason why he brought that up. All right, fine. So I get on Google and I sit there and start reading, and man, it was like, I have nothing to complain about in a lot of ways after I read the story of Job. And for the people that don't know, and we're not sitting here preaching the Bible and all that stuff like that, but this is an amazing story. So basically, he was this guy. He had wealth. He had a beautiful home. He had children, wife. You to today's standards, you could say he was like, he lived the Forbes 500 life. Like he had everything that society would ever want. Money, riches, wonderful family, just everything, status. He was an Instagram model, pretty much, right? He just had everything, and his life was perfect. Well,
but he was also a good man. He was also a good man.
He was a good man. Yes, he was. And the devil challenged God, and he goes, you think your followers are so faithful? He's like, I will prove and show to you that even your strongest ones will fold. And God said, okay. He goes, it was kind of like an agreement, kind of thing. And so over the course of Job's life, the devil literally ripped everything away from Job. His money, his house. He killed his wife, his children, everything. Job basically lost everything over the course of his life. You could just say that his whole life was a massive struggle of disappointment, death, many other words come to mind. But he never lost the faith. He never lost faith in God. And the devil was amazed that Job stayed true no matter what he did to him, that this guy would just keep his faith to God and believe that everything that was happening was part of the plan and that he would be redeemed and, he would still hold a place for him in heaven. And he never broke, like his entire life. And I hear that story. I'm just like, oh my God, like I couldn't imagine losing all of that and everything else. Like I've lost, but I've never lost like that. Man, I need to take a wrap off. I need to start looking at things and really start aligning with what I'm putting so much weight into. Like, what am I really focusing on here? What's most important in my life? And really these discussions started changing a lot in myself. These feelings start churning up a bit, and it was like, who do I want to be? And some of the lessons, and he writes them in there, is a man whose masculinity that rests in what he owns, the size of his home, and money, and what he can perform in his achievements, the people he knows, what model of donkey he rode, or his status in society. If a man rests his identity in any of those things, he will ultimately fail. Because every single one of those will disappear at one point or be taken from you. The only thing that would hold him together was knowing that who he was inside and what his values and what his actions and his heart believed, because there's only two people that know that, him and God. Nobody else will ever fully know that, because we've all had those moments where we do something and we go, oh my God, I'm never telling anybody that I did this, or that I was thinking this, or that I felt this. And then you just lock it away. And then someone comes up to you, you're like, oh my God, you're the greatest person ever. And you look at them, you're like, if you only knew, but I'm not telling you that. But we have
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, imposter, right? Or you're embarrassed, or something. But you never. There are some things that every single person will never tell anybody else because they're so ashamed of it. They were weak in the moment or something, and nobody ever wants to do that. We want to be happy. We want to celebrate. We want to have good times. Nobody wants to face the hard times or admit that they didn't meet the mark, or they fell short, or they weren't strong enough. They didn't have enough money. They didn't, whatever. It's a very uncomfortable feeling, but you and God, you know the truth. So, what that leads to is you start aligning with who you are and what you're doing in your life, and the purpose, those 4 pillars, right? Those are massive parts of this going into the future. And, the common theme, and we kind of talked about this, is men run away in our culture. When things are too comfortable, when there's like different things going on, it's just like, oh, this is hard, I'm going to run away. Like, I don't know how to handle this, and all the weight's on me, I'm leaving, and you just run away. Usually because it's one of those things that I mentioned, the achievements, the perform, whatever, but you're ultimately not sure who you are inside. And you don't have those pillars to lean on. You're just going to get up and flee, right? Now we'll get into that because we talked about this as well. A lot of people listening are probably just like, so what you're saying is no matter what happens, I just never leave? Like, what about, abusive situations and other things? Yeah. We're going to talk about that later. But the point is, we always hope about things. We hope that our marriages work out. We hope that we find fulfillment. We hope our children will turn out okay. We hope we can keep a decent job. right? Hoping is good. Never lose hope. Like hope is very, very, very powerful in having it. But then we always talk about you need to have guided action aligned with the hope and what you're doing in order to get there. Because it's not just going to happen by itself. You're going to have to break down barriers, go through some really tough shit in conversations, as Raph said, in order to get where you want to go. And a real man ultimately brings certainty to his world by the power of his promise, right? And I feel like that's such a cover thing, just to hurry up and get what I want. You know, like, oh, hey, can I have this? Yeah, but you have to do this first. Oh, yeah, okay, I promise. You know, it's always something like super quick of just like, oh, that's all I have to say. I just have to say a word and then you'll give it to me. Okay, cool. And no, man, that promise is so, it's who you are. It's who you're supposed to be. That word promise holds weight. Can you imagine telling your kids, like, I'm never going to leave you, I promise, and then you get up and leave? Like, what did you just do to that kid? Like, I don't have children, but I couldn't imagine doing that, you know. And is it a lie? Is it true? I don't know, man, because ultimately we all return to dust. And, you know, I remember sitting there with my dad on his deathbed, basically making peace with him before he died and apologizing for a lot of the stuff that we said or did in the year prior. And, you know, I remember looking at him and I was like, Dad, you promised we'd go out west and go on an elk hunt together. And he just kind of looked at me and grinned, and he kind of teared up and he's like, I know I promised you and I'm sorry. And that I'll never forget that, you know, until this day. I still want to go out west backpacking and go into the mountains and elk hunt and draw and quarter them out there and hike them out. And in some way, shape, or form, I feel like my dad will be with me when I finally get to do that and keep that promise that I kept to him, you know. And that's a long time. So it's stuff like that that's going to affect you, and that, you know, your kids are never going to forget. Your spouse is never going to forget. Go ahead, Mel.
All really very powerful stuff. And thanks for sharing that, especially about your dad, because I know that stuff is a very big deal when you're talking about your own father in his last days. I think a lot of the stuff underneath staying power and the ability to deliver, we think about it in these big times, or in the you know, in the stuff that's sort of life or death, the really important times. But you're not going to have developed the muscle to be able to deliver and have that staying power if you're loose with your word in the small things. And so you're only going to build that strength and ability to trust yourself when you commit your word, by having it as just a routine part of your life. And there's no way that you're going to be able to deliver in all the things you need to deliver in a family situation, as a father with children, with finances, with the marriage, all of that stuff, if you're flippant and you blow your word away on little stuff. It's just never going to stack up. It's never going to be that you're going to be living in a house of cards. And it's not going to take something big to bring that down. You're going to be someone who breaks and falls in really small ways. So for me, it's got a lot to do. Living up to that statement of a man's word is his bond, is that inner integrity, that you keep your word to yourself first, so that you know when you commit that it's going to be done. Like, you actually can build up over time the ability to trust yourself when you commit to things in the future, because you can point to real things that you have delivered in the past in a similar situation or in time of challenge, where you go, this thing is sorted and I don't need to toss and turn at night, because I know I will deliver, because I have a track record of doing that. And so that is respecting your own word, being true to yourself so that you can trust yourself over time. And that means doing what you said when you said you'd do it, you know, and inevitably life will occur and stuff will happen. And you're in that position of being able to own the breakdown, the non-delivery on time, or you got it done but late, or you didn't get it done, where you're the one who's talking about it. You're not relying on the other person to bring up, hey, you said you do X and you haven't done it. in a professional setting, you're letting people know ideally ahead of time. The same in family and personal relationships, where you're either doing what you said when you said you'd do it by, or you're the one owning it beforehand. You're letting people know, hey, that commitment I made, I'm not going to be able to make it for these very good reasons. I get the impact on you, and I'm now committing to this new thing. Like, I can't take you out to dinner this weekend because of all this stuff's happened at work, but I'm recommitting to this new date night that we're going to have the following week. Stuff like that. So the integrity that's going to underpin any kind of staying power, you have to build it up in the small things, and you have to respect yourself and respect your own word so that you can deliver it over time. Raf, you had your hand up earlier. You wanted to jump in with something?
Oh, I was just going to talk about, because we talked about the implications, obviously, when the father leaves the family. And we talked about, how it leads to, for women, it's pretty catastrophic equally for men. But I was going to say, because he kind of touches on this in the book, where he says, since the 1920s, sorry, there's been an increase of over 1,400%. That's 1,400 in the rate of divorce. And right now, from the 2000s to what we currently have, we've been averaging between high 6 to almost 1 million divorces a year. So if you imagine, and I'm not assuming that every marriage has a kid or children, but let's just say that every marriage does have at least one child. That's 1 million kids that will grow up in a divorced home every year, just added to the pool. It's a pretty devastating number if you think about it, especially going back to my whole thing about equity. Like, there's no better equity than having both parents in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are some of those contributing factors that, as the years go by, why do people feel it's okay to leave? And I believe Raf already said it, it's comforts. We've normalized it. Yeah. Divorce is normal. As a matter of fact, in the 90s, there was a famous psychologist who basically said, or maybe it was early 2000s, but she basically said that generation of kids, so not the Gen Xers, but the ones that immediately followed, or maybe she was referring to Gen Xers, but she was basically saying, like, that was the first generation where divorce, the idea of divorce in kids was normal. It was just parlance of the time. Like, it was just normal. Like, it wasn't taboo to come from a divorced home. It was like, oh yeah, your parents are split. Like, it wasn't even a conversation piece, right? It was just like, oh yeah. And it's devastating our society, and it's obvious, right? Well, I think it's just like you said, it's a common thing, and there's literally things built now in society to facilitate it. And the idea that, like, well, I don't need to put up with this. I can just simply run for the fact that, I could have 20 other women at the touch of my fingertips, that are all like coming across and that are just like, oh yeah, everything's perfect. They love me, everything's good with no struggle. And it's just, yeah, I could just leave this. I don't deserve this. I'm jumping over here. And then you get there and it may be what you think. It may not be what you think. And then you're just like completely lost on everything. It's like, this is what it was supposed to be. You lied to me. And then it's just like, well, I already left my marriage and now I'm just here by myself. And it's like, okay, now what do I do? And the options and the path to take it on the, I don't know, I want to say the easy route or appear to be easy route. There's so many more of those than it is just staying on that hard route of like, hey, I know what's right. I know what I'm supposed to do. These are the values this is the promises I made. I need to keep on this path and keep going and work through it, because ultimately, it's literally like, what's somebody saying the one time? It was something about like laying concrete, right? And it was like, yeah, concrete, it's messy, it's heavy, whatever. But if you pour it right, you're going to have one hell of a foundation and your building's never going to fall. I was like, damn. I think that was my brother that said that, because he lays concrete. I think it was him that said something like that. But I was like, okay, all right, I like that, but it's true. And yeah, man, like I said, instantly when I start reading this, like I'm going back through my life and sitting there thinking about things. Just like, did I run too soon? Did I not keep my promise? Did I fail at this? What was I aligned with? What was I trying to follow? What was I trying to achieve? Was it more about myself, or was it more about the other person? Was it about the relationship? Was it about God? Was it about, go down the list, man. And I fell short, and I think we all have.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to, that feels good to say. And I'm not sitting here as my own little therapy session, but honestly, we always talk when we have these conversations every week. I feel better after we discuss these things, because we make time for it. And it's like a time to just let this shit out instead of carrying it. And it's very powerful to me to talk about, but it's hard to stay. It's just hard, whether it's whether it's health, maybe I'm beat up. Maybe I'm just exhausted after being on the road for weeks and months at a time, or I don't know, so many things, but it's so tough, man. And you get tired and just beat down and exhausted. And then you keep talking about it or try to talk about it. And then people are just annoyed with you in a way, because they're humans too. And they're like, dude, shut up. I know, like, I don't want to hear the same thing over and over. So then you just like shut up and lock it up. And then you tell everybody, yeah, I'm fine. But inside you're not fine. And you're just trying to grind through the day. And it's like, man, what am I doing? Is this even worth it? And all these doubts and stuff start creeping into your head, man. It's a hard time. But I don't know. I would say, if you guys want to just kind of transition to the side that we were talking about, is like, when in any circumstances would you say that it's okay to walk away?
Yeah. 100%. So here's the thing. We're talking about delivering on your commitments, the things that you said you'd do. I will make the mortgage payments. I will go to work in the morning. I'll pay my taxes. I'll get food and provide for my family. I'll love my wife. I'll take you out and we'll have fun together. And whatever those commitments are, big and small, formal and informal, spoken and implied. Well, you don't need to tell your kids that you're going to feed them. Like, that's your freaking, that responsibility is implied. Do you know what I mean? That commitments already exists in the world. Where we're talking about possibly like ending a relationship that you're committed to, and you could think about this in a work way. So we were talking a bit offline before we started. Maybe there's a person, a co-worker. It could be a partner. It could be a romantic relationship, who has a substance abuse problem. And you're like, no, I've hired this person. And they could be, say, in an industry like the SF community or in aviation, where clearly they are now putting the lives of other people at risk. This is a decision they've made, and there are consequences to those actions that they're going to have to live with. And the commitment you've made to hire them does not mean that you now have to turn a blind eye to new inputs and new information that's coming in. Like, another one of the things you're supposed to have is wisdom and the ability to reflect and judge and have decisions. And so if you've got a, say, romantic partner, so in that example, like a co-worker on an airline who's got an irresponsible consumption of substances, they can't be around aircraft. It's super clear. And that decision they've made, they have consequences that they'll live with. If you've got a partner who's abusive or is belittling or is making someone feel bad, they're not delivering on their commitments that they made. And so there's going to be a point at which you're able to make a fresh decision. You're not like, well, I'm in this forever and I'll just suffer. There are times when you're able to take in new information and almost go through like a renegotiation, like a contract renegotiation, where you can say, I need to have these needs met. And if you choose not to meet them, then that choice of yours will now have consequences. A wife doesn't have to stay in a home where the husband's beating her just because she said she would. This guy's behavior, under any reasonable person, test would be shown to be, he's broken his commitments. You don't have to stay. Like, you're absolved of that decision. You don't have to keep the children in that situation. Like, there's responsibilities that you have to yourself and other people when someone has transgressed or broken their commitments, that the consequences on them. And then having that wisdom to be able to discern, is this something, am I giving up too early, or is this something that really is their responsibility? That's the one where it's going to be difficult, and you want to have a good, strong support network around you and people you can talk to, or time to reflect and judge, so you can make a decision that's appropriate. But we're not saying, and Stu Weber is not saying, that the abused wife must stay in the relationship, or that the airline must employ the drunk pilot, because ongoing actions and ongoing failures on other person's behalf also has consequences. And it can be a difficult part of it that also plays in. Did you have comments on that you wanted to add there at all, Rath?
No, actually, I think it's a good way to wrap it up, because we talked about staying, but I think it's good to also give, I don't want to call them loopholes, but if there ever is a reason, like you said, to not stay, it's when someone breaks their commitment, but not just any commitment, like something egregious as abuse, as whether it's psychological or physical. Like every relationship, they like to say it's 50-50. Sometimes as a married man, you know what I'm talking about, man, or anybody in relationship, really, it's not always 50-50. Sometimes you have to put in 98% of the work, but it's a give and take, right? If you're consistently the person that does the 98%, then eventually you're going to be like, dude, I'm tapping out. Like, if you're not going to commit to anything, I'm out of here. But no, I think you articulated that pretty well.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add there, Mike, just around that? Like, I'm also, when people say 50-50 in a relationship, that's normally a divorce with a 50-50 division of assets, right? Like, I really think in the relationships that work, you're all in. You're both all in all the time. And when someone's not all in, that's when you're having these discussions in hopefully a mature and healthy way, where you're able to say, these commitments are not being met on your side. Please be clear, let me know if I'm not meeting mine. Let's recommit, renegotiate, and try and make this thing work. But if someone's not delivering on a commitment they've made, I think that the consequences have to be reserved, that you can at some point exit. Was there other points you wanted to make here, Mike?
No, I think you nailed it, because it's not easy. Like, just don't try to sugarcoat it or anything. It's just not easy, and it sucks, and it's painful, because like we talk about hope. You hope things work out. You hope this goes the right way. You hope, but what you really have to pay attention to is the action and what's happening around you. Like, praying is good. Like, I always tell people, like, the power of prayer is very, very powerful. But there also has to be decisive actions that need to be taken, and then measure off of those actions and what you're doing, where you're applying your energy. And if you can look at those and step back and go, okay, this is what was promised, this is what we hoped for, but this is what is, and this is where we're at. And if you feel that on either side, and you have to take accountability for your own stuff as well, if you feel that the commitments on both sides are not being upheld, then you have a decision to make. Either, like Raph said, is, hey, I mean, if you're in a marriage, I mean, it's a lot deeper, right? And for me, I'm not married, but if you're in a marriage versus just dating someone, I think that's a little bit different, and because you didn't stand before God and make an oath to him till death do us part and everything like that. Like, I do feel that is different when you're standing up there making a commitment in front of family, friends, God, and everybody, and you're saying, hey, we're in this till the end, kind of thing. But man, it's just you got to make some decisions and be like, okay, am I putting in all the effort, like Raph says, like the 98% all the time? And be honest with yourself. It's like, hey, I know for like this period, I'm gonna have to put in the 98%, because maybe they're sick, maybe they're tapped out, and they can't put in the effort that they want because of whatever. But then looking at the other way is just like, am I always doing the work and they're just like staying who they are or don't want to change or don't put in the effort to change? And it's like, maybe not. I don't know, man. But that brings so much anxiety and worry that I think you start unbecoming yourself because you're so worried. And then it's like dancing on eggshells of like, I don't want to bring this up because I already know things are fragile. So I don't really want to bring it up because then it might really just create such a fissure in our relationship or in this spot that it's unrecoverable. So it's like, I still want this, but it's like, I know it's sensitive and it's like, hey, are you putting in the effort? And then boom, and then it blows up or something. You're like, oh shit, man, I'm just trying to make this work. I'm just trying to be better. And I'm sorry I got to ask the hard question, but I'm exhausted. It feels like I'm carrying the log sometimes or vice versa. Yeah, man, it's not going to be comfortable, but if it's something that you really want, both sides have to take accountability of what you're really, really doing. Be honest, even if it hurts, and make that assessment of like, we either stop, redo this understanding, communicate this contract, if you will, or just say, hey, you know what, we don't align and I don't want to change. You don't want to change. I don't have to hate you for it. Maybe it's just better that, we're not in each other's lives or we're separate, and we can still make it work. And then for people with children, it's just like, well, hey, maybe we don't work, but we need to work for the child.
Exactly.
And that's the right thing to do is to, hey, just because we didn't work out doesn't mean like the parents can't still uphold their promise to their children and be like,
That's
hey,
right.
I'm still going to be mom. I'm still going to be dad. I'm still going to be there for you no matter what happens, even if I can't physically be with this person anymore because of whatever. I'm never going to leave you. And I just want to applaud the people out there that are doing that, because that's not easy. And that's the hard route versus just cutting someone off and bad mouthing a parent and XYZ, whatever. But the people are out there that are grinding. I commend them for doing the hard.
That could be like the ultimate example of staying power, delivering the commitment to the children and making the co-parenting work as the highest or ultimate responsibility a parent has, even that will endure after the relationship with the mother or the parents. And there was on closing here, there was a point that Stu Weber says that understanding that the heart of staying power is sacrifice, which is giving oneself up for the good of another, that's where the energy is going to come from when you're clear around what the benefit it is to that other person. When you're getting up in the morning and putting your work clothes on and getting out the door, and you're delivering on your commitment there and providing resources for the kids and the family, or the mum loving the children and looking after them when they've hurt their knee, and that nurturing, all of that stuff, that the short-term sacrifice is for someone else. Cherry's grandfather had a really beautiful structure where he said, pain will always get to a point that it can exceed someone's ability to bear it. But pain plus love equals sacrifice. And when you've got that clarity around why you're bearing this load, you can continue to carry. And his example was JC carrying the crucifix across up the hill, So sacrifice is the key to give the energy for the staying power to deliver on the commitments you've made. They're your commitments. They're not anyone else's. And it's about a relationship to your word, and a man's word is his bond. Were there any final thoughts you guys wanted to leave here? We're just in the wind-up stage. Raf, did you have anything else?
No, I think this is just a real shout out to, or this is a real call for all men to kind of step up and be men, and then for women to choose men, right? Don't choose a boy, choose a man, and your life will be astronomically better. Like just, orders of magnitude well above what you could imagine. But I think it all revolves around all the stuff we talked about, commitment and staying power, and just people that are willing to sacrifice to believe in the purpose that they believe in. So whatever it is for that couple.
Fantastic, man. How about you, Mike? Have you got anything further you wanted to add there? I know you dropped a lot of really great stuff in.
Yeah, challenges as usual. I really like doing it because I literally think about it and I'm going to do it myself. I'm the type of guy, I'd never ask you to do something if I wasn't willing to do it myself, right? And that's part of like how I've understood about being a leader in different things, right, in my life. One of those pillars. Think about the people and the men in particular in your life. Describe who they are and what they do, and do they define staying power, or are they more demonstrating, kind of the floating through life and just cutting when things get hard, right? If you do have those people in your life, I would suggest having that conversation with them, or maybe even giving them some guidance and how you feel, how you view them, and maybe they can go off and work on themselves. But for me personally, I don't want to have people in my life who run at the first sign of hard times. And then in that story of Job, if the disasters that hit Job were to happen to you, how do you think you would deal with it? Where would your mind go? What would you do? What would happen if you lost your house? What would happen if you lost your car or your donkey? What would happen if your wife fell sick or passed away, or your children? If everything that you had, whether it be material wise or status wise, what would you do? Who would you become? Where would you go? Who would you ask for help? How would you realign yourself? Really sit down, maybe write those down, think about some things, and be like, man, who would I be in those worst moments? And ask yourself if you can handle it. And if the answer is no, which, let's be honest, a lot of us would probably say, yeah, I don't know if I can handle that right now. But your goal, and what we've talked about for a long time on these episodes in this journey the last couple of years, is pushing back against that idea that I just can't handle anything. It's just like, no, you can. The tools, the messages, the people are out there to help you build, and we should be aiming to be able to be who we want to be on our worst day. We said the quote out there, be the man that you envision yourself being the day of your father's funeral. Be the strongest person in the room. Mm-hmm. Right? That's who you should be aiming to be for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, for your kids, for your best friends, all of it. And just be honest with yourself, and maybe sit down and write down those, and then you might surprise yourself, you might not, but start developing a plan on what you can do to get better.
Right. And if anyone ever wants to talk, you can always drop us a line. You can drop us in a review, and we'll leave our email and so on in the show notes. So, Stu Weber, Tender Warrior, Chapter 4, Staying Power. Shout out to Stu for writing such a visionary book for us with a lot of wisdom in it. And until next week, take care.